Hey everyone, welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you're here. Whew, boy, here we are. So, different location. Got the fire going because there's no heat in my house, and for the time being, till they come and replace our furnace. So, new location, different time. So welcome back to all of my viewers, my subscribers, and people who have been coming along for this journey now for this whole time. And if you're new here, welcome. It's great to have you here. And I'll remind you at the end, but as always, whenever you interact with content from independent content creators like myself, regardless if you're on YouTube, BitChute, or Odysee, when you interact with the content by hitting that like button or commenting or subscribing especially, but also too sharing this content, it really does actually make an impact on the algorithm that puts this up in a suggestion feed. So if you find it helpful and inspiring and gives you some guidance along the way, maybe other people will find that too. So thank you in advance, and let's get into it. We're going to talk about the week's astrology, a little bit about the personal issue. Thank you so much for your patience. I wasn't even able to go to the funeral that I had planned on going to yesterday because I have gotten sick. I'm on the mend now, but yesterday was the worst of it. Such an interesting timing. Interesting timing. To be sick. Like I said, I am on the mend. It's now just kind of like a general malaise and a little bit of achiness, but the worst of it has already passed, and that was yesterday. So I'm grateful for that. Grateful for my immune system. Thanking my immune system for working and functioning properly all throughout this process, doing all the things that I know work, to influence and support my natural immunity. So taking my cell salts, a lot of fluids, right? Teas, herbal teas, bone broth, clean water, a little bit of food, but not much, right? CBD to help with my symptoms and to sleep, right? Because it was pretty gnarly to have a headache and nausea and all that fun stuff. And listening to F Sharp. Man, listening to F Sharp like it was my job, right? Just having F Sharp, crystal bowl healing, sound healing on a loop and sleeping to it has really helped. And I did post this actually on, because this has come up in some other ways in my experience recently. And it's one of those things that I already knew, but I never really put together until it was pointed out to me. And then I was like, oh yeah, the thymus gland. This is a huge part of our endocrine system, and also very important for our immunity, right? It's where our immune cells are created, is in the thymus. And so the F sharp tone, right, between F, which is the heart chakra, and G, which is the throat chakra, the F sharp, very close to the Schumann resonance, may I add, is really stimulating for your immunity. So I just put on a track, just like YouTube or whatever, F sharp sound healing. Make sure if you're going to do this that you test it and make sure it is F sharp. And the easiest way to do that is to, play F sharp on a piano or a keyboard if you have one, or you can just go to YouTube and type in F sharp tone, and it'll just give you the tone of F sharp. And you can then make sure that what you're listening to is in fact F sharp. And then it's just on a loop, right? Just on a loop. And that actually made a huge difference. 174 hertz. Also, if you're having a lot of physical pain, is a great way to, is you can listen to sound healing at 174 hertz as well. And that will help if you have physical pain, any kind of pain. It doesn't have to be physical, emotional pain. You're really getting deep in underneath the root chakra into that earth star chakra at these tones that that the ear is barely able to hear, the longer the wavelength, right? So the more connected you're going to be to the plants and the planet's own vibration, which is the Schumann resonance. So anywhere around that 7 to 8 range, give or take, is going to be the resonance of the planet herself. And we're gonna talk about this today, and there's gonna a couple things I want to show you that are actually directly related to the astrological cycles, because we're going to talk about the weekend, of course. And I know we're all waiting anxiously for the press release for the audit, the Maricopa County audit. So that's going to be at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So in the meantime, you can entertain yourself with some astrological musings and what to look at for the weekend. We are going to have our third quarter moon. It's going to square the sun here on the 28th, and Friday is the 1st of October. And from here, I promise, get you the the equinox and the seasonal astrology. It's really important that we go over this, and I've been wanting to do it, but I have to take care of myself, right? I have to take care of myself. Also, too, the same day that I got sick, my dad had to go into emergency surgery to repair some things that had gone wrong as a result of his original surgery, which was weeks and weeks ago. So, he missed the funeral, and it was one of his very close family members, actually. So it's been a stressful time, to say the least. And I'm just grateful that my body and his body and our immune systems are doing the best that they can in order to move us through this process. And we're going to see that the sun has been very active recently, and there's some strong connections to last month at this time that are very similar. And so you see how we are in a cyclical arrangement here, but it's more like a spiral, right? Because you come back around to the same position, but you're not quite the same anymore, right? Because things have changed. The cosmos has moved, and things are in a different position and a different configuration, which has a different resonance, right? Geometric patterns have a resonance. And so things are different, but they are, in fact, going in a cycle. And I want to show you the cycle from a very just plainly scientific standpoint. And I'm going to share some actual video footage from suspicious observers from last month and this month around the same time. We're going to see what is happening that's similar, but also, too, what's different in the astrology and what is different within us, right? Within us and what we're experiencing outside of us. Because last month, around this time, when the moon transited from Aries into Taurus, and you're going to see what exactly was happening, and some of you already know because you experienced it directly. Last month, when we were going through this exact time period of Aries into Taurus with the moon transit, there was a lot of Virgo energy, right? We were all kind of, really focusing, especially the sun was in Virgo, Mars was in Virgo, even, and Mercury was in Virgo, right? We were really a lot of focus in our creative expression and our sustainment, which is the sun, the realm of the mind, which is Mercury, and even Mars, that warrior energy. It was very much focused on that Virgo energy because it was, and what did that translate to? We were doing a lot of work under the surface within ourselves: discipline, devotion, purification, analysis, and intuition, right? We were really getting underneath the surface of who we are and to work on ourselves and to put things where they belong and to be meticulous about it, right? No room to be distracted, no room necessarily to not focus on that goal. And what is that goal? Ultimately, the goal during Virgo time is that the fruit comes to its maturity and bears the seed for the next cycle. Well, now we're in Libra time, right? We just had our equinox point, so the sun is in Libra. Mercury is in Libra, going to station retrograde in the next 2-3 days, right, in late Libra. And Mars is in Libra now at its detriment, all right, is powerful. Venus last month was in Libra, which is part of her rulership was Libra, but now she's in Scorpio, which is she's also at her detriment now. She is not as powerful. And we start to feel into how much more difficult things are going to be now, and how much more it is about our relationship with other in a lot of different ways. It ceases to be about us and what we're doing within ourselves now that we've moved into Libra season officially. And because Mercury is going to station retrograde in conjunction with Arcturus, it's going to move all the way back to the same place it was at the new moon, the Virgo new moon. So there's a lot of crossover here. And again, the cycle's coming back around, but you're not in the same place anymore. It's a spiral experience. And it's not about us individually anymore. It's really about our relationship with other. It is about the transfiguration that we have to participate in order to find balance and justice and fairness. And it is about the action outside of us, the application of what we learned about ourselves out into this relationship. And we're going to see how there have been things that have transpired a month ago at this time that are very similar to what's happening now at a solar level, let's say, and how that also translates to our own experience as well. So this is really just an exercise to look at cyclical motion and how it actually impacts us in real time, and how we can then use this knowledge, very much a Libra thing, applying our knowledge to finding the form of balance in relation to other, whatever other is, whoever other is, in a social context, because it's not about us anymore. We've had our time to really do this work inside of us, and now it's time to apply it to the social context, right? And there is support, even though it is troubling and destructive, because we have Uranus involved again, right? Let's just look at it. First, I'm going to show you two clips from last month from Suspicious Observers and today from Suspicious Observers. And then we're going to look at the astrology of these 2 points, and then we'll move forward into the weekend and the rest of the week. So we know what energies are here to be part of our experience, right? We are here to align with this and to choose how to align with this, not necessarily influence these massive cycles at a galactic level that we are meant to be part of, not to manipulate necessarily. So let's, I'm going to minimize myself here, and we're going to look here. We're going to come into this first. So this is from today. Let me check in with the stream real quick. Okay, so this is from today, and I want to, and if you do listen to Suspicious Observers, then you know what I'm talking about probably, and you've already seen some of this in action. So I can minimize myself a lot more so you can really just see the whole picture here. All right, here we go. First, let me turn on the desktop and turn off.
Folks, the second M-class solar flare may not have produced much of a CME, but it flashed up the Atlantic ionosphere, surging the global electric circuit immediately, and triggering the formation of Tropical Storm Sam within minutes. Folks, it wasn't a coincidence. We see this all the time at sunspot maximum, and the 9 pages in Weatherman's Guide to the Sun on solar forcing of lightning, storms, and the tropics, probably some of the most important in the book. It's the flare events, the proton bombardment, the CME impact, and the geomagnetic storm, all with connections, all about the particle forcing or global electric circuit. And for those who remember our student, national science champion Ferris Wald, who should be graduating soon now that I think about it, by the way, he won for that exact connection. The hardcover is unavailable and it is textbook expensive, but our PDF is half price.
Okay, so that was from today. So recap, we've been getting a ton of solar weather, and as you saw, it created that storm. There it is. Tropical Storm Sam forms in Atlantic. This was minutes after we got this solar weather, as you can see here, and the high frequency, right? The M-class solar flare. It didn't cause a lot of geomagnetic unrest necessarily, but what it did do is have an impact on the ionosphere, right? I think I'm getting that right. So I'm not the expert in this field. This is why I listen to Ben, because he is. And now what we're going to do is we're going to look at, so that's that one. We're going to look, oh yeah, and look at this. The Schumann is doing absolutely nothing, right? A power of 16. This was on the 22nd, on the day of the equinox, and it has since slowed down to very calm. So that's pretty interesting, considering the fact that we are getting bombarded with M-class solar flares and strong geomagnetic or strong solar weather, right? There's a lot of, if you watch the whole video from today, you'll see how he points it out, where the solar wind is coming from and what speed and everything. But normally the the electromagnetic field, the magnetosphere, is supposed to like buffer this, and it isn't, right? It's not really doing much. And so it's allowing in, the Earth's magnetic field is weak, and it's allowing in all of this solar energy, okay? So I just wanted to point that out too. Now we're going to look at, I want you to look at the date, August 28th, 2021, okay? Are you ready? Because this is where it's going to make some more sense here. Oops. No, I want that to stay on.
Not least, some shots from our textbook on solar forcing of terrestrial storms, including the tropical variety. Folks, it's no coincidence that the tropical storm of the year so far is heading into the Gulf as the sun keeps pounding away, and it's no secret why they took the forecasted strength up over the last day. It may have been a few years since any of you thought about the first student observer, Ferris Wald, who took a study of the sun in tropical storms and won his state championship, the National Science Championship, and was a semifinalist at the World Championships. We are watching that science unfold in real time right now on Earth. We greatly appreciate your support. We've got shots.
And here's our chart for today. Sorry, I forgot my mic was off. And we will talk about this. But do you remember, my friends, what happened the 26th, 27th, 28th, and ultimately the 29th of August? That was when Hurricane Ida, the 29th specifically, was when Hurricane Ida was hit land in the Gulf in Louisiana. Do you remember that? Right? That's very interesting. You see the solar activity that ramps up and comes out, and all of a sudden there are these huge storms that come out. And the Schumann, right, the electromagnetic field of the planet is not responding very well at all, actually. So I just want to point that out, because now what we're going to do is we're going to go and look at the astrology of that time. So let's start on the 26th. Oh, look at that. There's our moon in Aries. All right, let me make sure that you guys can see it. Okay, look at that. Here's our moon in Aries, and we just talked about this on Wednesday, right? And how the moon was going to be meeting Eris, was going to be in a square to Pluto in Capricorn, right? So, and Eris, the dwarf planet Eris, is in the goddess of discord, the goddess of chaos, right? And she is at this degree and has been for a while. The dwarf planet Eris is further out than Pluto is in its orbit, right? It's like a 500 plus year orbit around the sun. Eris is the goddess of discord. She threw the golden apple into the party because they didn't invite her. And she's just like, well, I'm going to show you that you can't keep me out. Now look at this. So first of all, we see that square comes back around same time as right now. So I'm going to show you right this moment, right? Well, now the moon is in Taurus. So on the day of our equinox, we also see, here it is, the same thing. The moon comes into, now it's in a direct sextile with Jupiter, but also too, was in a square to Pluto retrograde in Capricorn at the same degree. So, and we see the same type of phenomena coming back up here with these, you know, the next month. That's very interesting. The moon in Aries making these connections to Pluto. Now, one thing I want to show you about this time frame, again, is if you see here, this is what we call a yod. And we've talked about this astrological aspect and configuration before, right? The finger of God. You have a sextile between 2 points, and then you have two quincunxes, these green lines that go to one place, right? There's the pointing finger of God. These two quincunxes represent that opportunity to adjust ourselves. It's the round peg in the square hole, which is, in fact, really squaring the circle of alchemical transmutation. So the quincunx is always the opportunity to practice this. And so you have two quincunxes coming from two different directions to one singular point, but they are connected to each other by this sextile, which is the Star of David, the sixth seal of Solomon, right? It is the two triangles superimposed on each other, one upright, one inverted, right? It's the descending of the spirit and the ascension of the material. That is what the sextile ultimately represents. And it's an investment. We have to invest both of these energies, as above, so below, at the same time in order to find this. And so you see that at the same time, last month in August, while all of this was going on, it was coming to a yod with Mercury, who was in a trine with Pluto, right? A trine, 120-degree angle, where it's a completely supported, foundationally supportive. They get a lot of traction from each other, right? And there's harmony without having to do much in this situation, right? And this is the degree we've talked about before, the flag at half-mast, right? The flag at half-mast. And Mercury is in Virgo, right? This is a very powerful place for Mercury because we use our analysis as well as our intuition in Virgo. And so Mercury is very capable of being in this space and really functioning at optimal levels in terms of intuition, in terms of analysis. It's not so much of taking in the data, it's about analyzing the data and using our minds to do it. And so this was finding itself a lot of traction and support with where Pluto was at the same time that the moon was squaring it, and then also this yod. So you saw all of this energy really pointing to where Mercury was, that was giving us the ability to really analyze and be very meticulous about our service and the work we're doing on ourselves in relation to the bigger destructive patterns that are happening, right? And I would argue that the sun, in its solar maxima, as it ramps up and continues to shoot out solar weather with a very weak magnetic field, we are naturally being bombarded with energy that is supporting in some ways the work of Pluto, right? The destructive process that's coming about through the way that it creates storms, the ways that it actually creates storms in the body, right? We've talked about that. And actually, if you go to Suspicious Observers, when there are many times that he brings up research papers that show the connection and correlation between different health impacts in solar weather. So we know that it's there and it's now being studied. So the last time this happened, last month, we had the same moon transits, we had the same connection to Pluto. It's just that Mercury was in a different place than it is now, right? And so was Mars, and so was the sun, right? We hadn't even gotten to the new moon yet. We were still functioning from that last lunar cycle that had to do where we were really coming off of that Aquarian aspect, right? And Uranus was definitely involved. And we're going to see here how much Uranus is involved in this process just in general. So if we go forward the next day, we're going to start to see, because this is when the hurricane started, was the 26th. And as the 27th rolled along, we're still feeling it. That yod is gone now because the moon crossed Uranus, right? Uranus in Taurus, that literally is shaking up our actual material reality. The moon meets Uranus, right? So it becomes very personalized. It becomes something that we intuit. It becomes something that is right here in front of us that we're feeling. And at the same time, here's Venus in her home sign of Libra, which, by the way, this is a degree off, I should say. This is within a degree of this next new moon on the 6th of October. Just keep that in mind, okay? Where Venus is in this quincunx, right? With Uranus. And this is about being able to stay in the eye of the storm. In fact, I'm pretty sure I did a daily medicine transmission with this symbolism of the eye of the storm, because Venus was in this position of showing that there's always going to be the cycle, right? And to find peace and transpersonal peace as you become the hub, right? Where everything's moving around you and you're at your 0 point, within yourself, right? And it's the toroidal field that is created as a result of the movement of energy through you, but your heart space and the center of you is really the hub of that wheel. And the quincunx with Uranus, again, was that moment of transmutation, because Venus is about how we feel about the material world, our sensitivity to the world around us, and being comfortable, being secure, feeling safe, right? And having harmony and beauty. And so she was really in a position in this quincunx while this hurricane is happening, and obviously it was impacting one specific place, but the solar weather that was coming in was making an impact too. And we were having an opportunity to transmute ourselves in the face of this very real disruption, with Venus and Libra being like, when you find the hub, when you find the center of the scale in your material life, in your relationships, in your relationship to the material world, this is how you can transmute and awaken when you are faced with very challenging situations in your actual material life. And again, everything was in Virgo, right? We had all this energy really focused on the work we're doing within ourselves, okay? And so now we come around to now. So let's look at now. Oops, sorry about that, guys. So let's look at right now. So today, this is the 24th. We are looking at number 1. Here's our moon right back with Uranus again. And now Venus is making that connection to Uranus again, but in direct opposition. Direct opposition, right? This is a tension because Venus is now at her detriment. She does not like being sensitive to the world of power. She does not like sinking to the bottom of the lake and having to deal with the darkness and the power and the inevitability of having to look at our own shadow. That is something that is a real struggle when you're trying to be and attempting to be sensitive to the material world around you, because this is all based on depth of feeling. So this is the 7 of Cups in the tarot, and in the Thoth tarot specifically, the 7 of Cups is that, drowning in the swamp, the illusion of the intoxication, right? It's very difficult for Venus to be in Scorpio. So if you have Venus in Scorpio, like I do, for instance, this is something you're already calibrated and part of your natal blueprint to be able to hold this type of space. And it tends to, you can get really obsessive about your relationships and just like, there's a drive, there's a strong drive and an urge with Venus and Scorpio to get to like the most merging you can possibly get to. But what you do in the process of doing that is that you integrate your shadow into yourself, and it comes through your material reality, which we can't really escape if you're in a material body. Like, as much as we want to think that we can bypass this, if you're still in a physical body, you're still in a physical body, and we still are subjected to the laws of physical nature. The whole point of this is to bring it all back together, the two aspects together, and unify. So, and that's something that I want to talk about in more of the seasonal astrology report, because I have some perspectives that are not going to be very popular, but I do feel like that it's important that I at least share them. So now we're at the same point, right? We're getting bombarded with solar weather. There was these M-class solar flares that came at us, and it immediately created another spiral storm in the Gulf, right? In terms of where it really landed. And now we're in a different place, though. Now we're in a different place, right? Because yes, the moon is back here with Uranus, so we're going back over it again. Right? We're having that direct feeling-based connection to the disruption in Taurus, right? That Uranus and Taurus represents, right? It's no stability, right? It's almost futile in Taurus with Uranus to expect any stability. And specifically here, it's really testing our character. Can we handle the storm? And so it comes back around, the solar storm, the storm of society. But now everything over here is in Libra. The sun is in Libra, Mars is in Libra, and Mercury is in Libra in conjunction with Arcturus. And this is now not about us anymore. It is time now to step out of that process of growing the fruit. The seed now is being revealed, and the application of what we learned about ourselves needs to be brought forward into the social context. And that's a really important distinction that needs to be made as we come back around, because we learned a lot from that last cycle. Now it's time to bring it out into the fold, right? Bring it out into something that's not necessarily about us, and how it's conditioning us and purifying us. It's now about how we're applying that to a social context. And Mercury is going to station retrograde at this degree. It's in conjunction with Arcturus, right? Our big Arcturian starseed activation, huge. This is a great time to connect to that part of yourself if you know you have Arcturian starseed lineage, or if you don't, it's okay. I mean, you can still connect to the archetypal representation of the Arcturians because they are the masters of the universe, right? They hold the keys of wisdom of how the universe is able to stay balanced and in equilibrium and what that takes, right? Because it doesn't take stagnation. It won't be stagnant. It's always a process of oscillation, always. And so it requires being able to be adept enough to simultaneously move back and forth. And it's very quantum, right? I mean, quantum mechanics is a big Arcturian starseed kind of interest, is the quantum mechanics and quantum physics, because the idea of quantum entanglement is that things exist in two places at once simultaneously outside of time and space. And it's the same idea when you think about it from an esoteric or even just an energetic practice. How do you exist in two places at once and transfigure yourself in order to be balanced in relation to other at any given moment, right? It's a constant process that we engage in. But the thing that's different about last month, when the same solar weather came around, these same storms came around, is now it's coming out into the open. Now it's coming out into a social context. And now Mercury is in a square to Pluto, not in a trine as it was last month. It's in a square to Pluto, right? Cross purposes. All right. Cross purposes, okay? This is where when these things meet each other, especially cardinal energy, cardinal Libra, cardinal Capricorn, these are cardinal air and cardinal earth, right? They can potentially blow apart. So it's important that we realize that so that we can really lean into that discomfort. And the discomfort comes from the fact that there's still things that are being pulled away, right? They're being destroyed at a cultural level, at a traditional level, at an institutional level that we have relied upon in order to give us something to stand on, literally, and figuratively, of course. But at this point, what's the difference? The tension here with where Mercury is at is how do you stay balanced in the scheme of the ultimate dualistic dynamic of death and rebirth? Because Pluto is the agent of our transformation, but it comes from the destruction of the old and bringing forward the new. You need to, there is a very obvious cycle in everything that we engage in this reality, and polarity gives us the opportunity to exercise our free will at any given moment. And so we embrace it as the alchemical power. This is how we create something new, is by transforming it, right? That's what alchemy represents. And a catalyst is a substance that you enter into a chemical reaction that gives it the energy to make the reaction. So it's going to be different for everyone, but what I will say is that it's time now that it's brought forward out into the social context, and it's going to be very uncomfortable with Venus in this opposition to Uranus, as we experienced directly yesterday, because we are now dealing with, on the one hand, feeling and being sensitive to where we're going, right? And really starting to get a strong feeling and depth of feeling of what it means to evolve, and the reality where Uranus is at, especially because the moon is right here as well now. So we're really feeling into the aspect of the storm that that's the literal Sabian symbol, right? It is you pull down your hat and you close your coat and you brave the storm, literally. And so now we are dealing with that as well, but we can't get lost in here, even though it'll be really easy. And because Venus is like, okay, well, we still have to be aware of where we're going. We still have to cultivate the skill set and the consciousness of where we're going. And it's dark down here, and we're at the very bottom of what this means and these power dynamics. And it can really easy get lost here. And this is where people do get lost, is in Scorpio in the 8th house. Like, if you can't handle looking at yourself in the mirror and being like, shit, that's what I see, and integrate that into who you are, then you haven't hacked your shadow. This is that moment where Venus is like, okay, I've hacked my shadow. Now what am I going to do with it? And it's going to be very tempting to fall back into all of this over here, getting caught up in the storm that's happening now. We have to also be able to look simultaneously, again, into the future. It's real easy when you're thinking about it from your mind. It's a different story entirely when you have to experience it in real time and in your own depth of emotion. And this is where we're at right now. So, and Mercury's going to station retrograde on the 27th. So let's look at the rest of the astrology for today as well, so we can see where we're going here. Here's the 24th. So we saw that. One thing I will say is we're not going to see this on the chart here on this chart, but the moon will come around and be in a sextile to Pallas Athena right after it passes this point. And so what I will say here is that the best way, I would say, is going to be a sextile to Athena that's over here in Pisces, and she's in this degree. So Pallas Athena is the goddess of strategy and wisdom and war, right? And it's retrograde. So we are really kind of going within with this strategy right now. And at this point in Pisces, it's this idea that you have to really find some solitude. You have to find some quiet inspiration or some silence in order to be inspired. You need to kind of like push out all the and not even push them out. It's more like you just have to be willing to be able to, I would say to a certain extent, really get into the quiet of this process in order to be inspired. Yeah, in the quiet of his study, a creative individual experiences a flow of inspiration, reliance upon one's inner source of inspiration and guidance. Okay, so we've been talking about this endlessly, about trusting your own innate, trusting your gut, right? You really have to get into that, because that's going to be your main source of inspiration, is what is going on in your intuition and your gut, right? Your mind will deceive you. Your heart will, in a lot of ways, deceive you too. It's really about your gut. It's never going to lie to you. This is why most of your immune cells are in your gut, right? Is the first line of information to you. And this is why getting into the body is going to be such an important thing to understand as we go through this season and we embark on this Pleiadian revival that's coming with the shifting of the nodal axis of the moon. So today, where the moon is in that sextile to Pallas Athena, that strategy, we can apply that and invest that strategy into where the moon is, which is really this degree of Taurus is interesting. It's like an old teacher really fails to interest his students, right? It's old school. It's not working anymore, right? And so we know that it's not working anymore. We're going to hit a wall with this audit. I'm telling you, we're going to hit a wall somehow, and we're going to have to really get into ourselves to really know what to do next, because the same old shit has not been working. And we're going to have to, I would say, be very realistic about that, and so that we are prepared and ready to dive back in, right? Which is where Venus is, to dive in and to really understand how we make change and what cooperation and communion really, the power in that, okay? Because what we've been doing has not been working. Now, some things are working. I'm just saying on a mass level. And based on the symbolic representation of all of this, we're going to find ourselves in this moment of like, well, this stuff isn't working. So let's see if I can employ a different strategy that involves me actually just following my own intuition and kind of shutting out all the other people telling me what I should or shouldn't be doing, right? I'm just here to interpret the language of astrology. What you do is really up to you. I'm not going to tell you, you need to do this or do that or stay this way or that way. It doesn't matter what I say. It doesn't matter what anybody says. It matters what your gut is telling you to do, right? And if you're not able to get into the depth of your feeling about it, as uncomfortable as it is here with Venus and Scorpio, then you're not going to really be able to get into your subconscious and hack your own shadow. So, and then beyond that too, we're going to find, let's see, this is today as well. And then we talked about how the moon and Uranus is going to be opposite Venus. Okay, so that's pretty much today. And we're going to see that really play itself out as the audit starts to roll up. That'll be 4 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. So be ready. Be ready for that. Now, this is going to get interesting. Tomorrow's the 25th. We're going to have a grand air trine on like a double level here, which is really kind of cool and exciting. It's one air trine, but you're going to see that this base here is extra reinforced. So we'll talk about that too. Let's see here. All right. So, the 25th. That's tomorrow. All right, guys. Too many windows open. All right, the moon is in Taurus, is going to first make a sextile over to Pisces, again, this time with Neptune. Oh, my fire went out. Oh, well, start it back up later. So it's going to make this sextile to Neptune in Pisces. Still retrograde, still at this position of like bringing down the law from the mountain, right? It's about how do we take this great peak experience that we're all happening of this great awakening and apply it to real life? How do we apply it to real life? This has really been the question that Neptune has been, really making available, really presenting to us, basically, especially in its retrograde. So we're really asking ourselves, each of us individually, as everything is being kind of like, dissolved away into everything else, how do you take this peak experience of the awakening and apply it to real life? And I hope people have been really coming to terms with this and asking these questions and doing more than just like sharing memes on social media, because we really do have to do more than just that. And so the sextile to the moon in Taurus at this moment, we're going to get some measure of the white dove, right? This is what that degree of Taurus represents, is the white dove over troubled waters, right? And again, inspiration that comes in the overcoming of a crisis. So we're still trying to figure out, what do we do? We're going to hit, I just feel like we're going to hit a wall with the audit, and we're going to have to be like, now what? Now what do we do? So the spiritual inspiration that comes to the individual in the overcoming of crisis. So we have this white dove flying over troubled waters in a sextile, right? In a sextile with Neptune, right? We have to invest these energies into each other. And again, it's about taking that peak. If we want to be inspired, if we want spiritual inspiration to overcome a crisis, we have to actually take that peak experience of the awakening and apply it to real life. It means nothing if the tablets don't come down off the mountain. And there's been a lot of effort to control and manipulate and mitigate this awakening process. And so we want to be open. This is a prayer moment. If we want, praying is really going to help in this situation to allow ourselves to create the resonance that is open and receptive. We're still in a lunar cycle that has to do with receiving and listening and being patient and open to receive. And this moment here can really give us a real strong sense internally, but in a very material way in Taurus, the inspiration of how to take that great peak experience and put it into something like real life, boots on the ground, which is difficult for, with Neptune. But again, it's retrograde, so all the fog is cleared away. We really do have a clear picture here as long as we actually apply this great experience. We can't just like stay up on the mountain. Moses didn't stay up on the mountain. He came down with the tablets and said, here it is. Now we got to actually act on it. So it's important that if you're really committed to that, and you're open to that, then this is a moment where you can get into your space, your prayer space, your meditation, and really ask for the inspiration if you're struggling, okay? And then we move forward. Now, this is where things get really interesting. Black Moon Lilith. You're not going to see here. I'll show it to you on here. Ta-ta-ta. Well, here's our grand trine. Isn't that nice? I want to make sure you guys can see this too. Yes. Okay. Now, Lilith in this position is, and the nodes, I'm not going to change it right now. These are averaged. I read when they're actually true because they oscillate, and I think that oscillation is important to measure on a daily basis or on a regular basis. But what I will say is that Lilith is the average Lilith, or the mean Lilith, is at 7 degrees, but the true Lilith is over here a little bit further at 12 degrees Gemini. Well, it's going to be in a conjunction with asteroid Ceres right now, the newly opened lands, okay? The newly opened lands. Remember what Black Moon Lilith is. Black Moon Lilith is that part of ourselves that's even darker and deeper than our own individual feminine or yin characteristics. It is the connection to the dark feminine entirely, right? It's got a Kali energy to it. It's got a deep, protective, it's so deep, it's self-preserving. It's so deep that you don't even realize that it's there, but you're still acting from it. It requires that you are conscious of your deepest, darkest desires and your deepest, darkest animalistic tendencies for self-preservation at an earth level, in a feminine level. And because that is, we get so much power from here, so much, but we have to be conscious of it and aware. Otherwise it takes us over. So having it reach asteroid Ceres over this weekend in a conjunction with this degree that it's about letting go of the past, liquidating of the past, liberating yourself from the ghosts of your past, right? And what is asteroid Ceres? She is the goddess of the grain and agriculture. She represents the changing of the seasons, the process of the feminine going in and out, right? Of up and into the underworld, right? And how it's necessary to contract as much as it is to expand. And this is how we get a growing cycle. It's essential that we have both of these elements in order to grow something. And so for Black Moon Lilith, who's also retrograde right now, is meeting Ceres this weekend in this position. And so if we have to let go, we have to let go of the past, right? And it's really tempting to hang on to it, because who else are we if we don't hang on to all of our past wounds and all of these past situations? We have to let it go. And in fact, we can really gather some really deep power from this place if we realize that we have to let go of the past so that we can move forward into the future. And I think a lot of people are struggling with that because they want to hold on to their own side of things, and they also want to keep acting. And I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't act. What I'm saying is that it stops becoming about us now that we're in Libra, and us individually, and starts becoming about the we when we come into Libra. So it's important that we let go of our own past in some ways, so that we're changing constantly, right? We're evolving every hour at this point. So be willing to change just along with that as well, and realize that it's necessary to go through this oscillation in order to actually access this very deep power, and also to move forward. It's going to be really powerful. So what else is happening on the 25th? Well, the moon is going to start. It's going to come into a square. Yes, here we go. So what else is happening? The moon is going to square Jupiter in Aquarius, and right here, and is also going, you can see that right here, and then come into a trine with Pluto retrograde in Capricorn, and this is now getting into Pleiadian territory. So again, part of the aspect of Taurus is the material world, which is also is connected to cycles, but it's much more of just an existing as is, right? It's not consciously being aware of it yet. That's what happens in Gemini. When we're in Taurus, we're just connected to what is, and we are just allowing ourselves to be modulated in some ways by what is. And the square to Jupiter in Aquarius, of course, is going to, have us in Taurus. Part of being in the physical world is this propensity to want to survive and to want to protect it, and to take up actions and behaviors in a survival mode, right? That's part of living in material realm, is survival. And so the square with Aquarius is like you're looking so much towards the future and the big picture, and the humanitarian collective as a whole, and being able to exit your passions in order to teach from a deep place of deep wisdom. we're going to feel a really strong urge to want to protect what is ours, okay? And part of that is we're going to lean into how uncomfortable that is, where there's a lot more of an expansion and an advocacy for each of us to really step out of that just for a moment in order to show what we're capable of in the big picture by not just like unconsciously engaging in that protective aggression, because I think it's going to be really strong. Now, at the same time, you're going to see here that there's going to be a trine to Pluto in Capricorn. And so what we're offering here is not so much about what we are trying to protect for ourselves, but if we can see that it's much more about giving of ourselves for the bigger, for the collective, right? How we can cultivate our natural energies for collective use rather than to just protect ourselves or to be, to follow those aggressive instincts to protect ourselves, but actually realize that we're cultivating all of these natural energies for collective use. This is very much in line with where Pluto is in its destruction of our, reality as we know it right now. And of course, this is a Pleiadian connection, right? The moon is now coming into conjunction with the Pleiades. And so there's some support here from them, because their role is really to show us how to live from an open heart, which allows for the full expression of above and below very naturally. And when we do that, then we have a strong field. So but when we want to like protect it and hold it and like close up a little bit, which is normal because we're in a physical form, but when we do that, it doesn't allow us to actually step into the power of the full collective that Aquarius represents. So, but when we come into the trine with Pluto, it's going to show us again, we can step into that role of like the cultivation of these energies, really finding a lot of support and harmony with what Pluto is destroying, which is going to seem really counterintuitive, but that's, we have to let a lot of this go in order to get to where we're going. And a lot of people are just desperately hanging on to what is and trying very hard to hang on to what is that is meant to go away, right? We still haven't even hit the Pluto return in the United States yet. Just you wait. This year it's just going to ramp up. It's just going to ramp up. Anybody telling you we're on like some sort of last leg right now, they're not looking at the astrology, are they? This is just like the trailer, right? We're in the overture right now. We haven't even Pluto hasn't even stationed direct yet. And it's going to cross over the Pluto return point of the US like 3 or 4 times this year. So, okay. So just be aware of that you can... It's not all to just be like, oh God. It's like, I'm not saying we shouldn't fight for our freedom and our liberty. Of course we should. Oh my God. And our sovereignty. What I'm saying is that when you realize that there are things that need to be let go of in order for us to really let go, and realize that we're cultivating this for a larger purpose, not just for ourselves, right? Again, that goes back to the Libra energy, right? It's time to step out into the collective context, into the social context. It's not just about us and what we want individually now, right? It's not about that anymore. We have to start actually realizing that our energy impacts other people very directly. And the sun and the moon, or the sun and Mars and Mercury are all there, and even Venus and Scorpio are all there to, give us personalized connection to what this means. If only we were to align with it and follow it, right? Instead of resisting it. So let's see, the 25th. Yep, the moon is going to quincunx Mercury. So there's a moment of adjustment and opportunity, as always with those quincunxes, where we want to ritualize our desires somehow. And again, Mercury is like, no, you need to really become adept in your mind at being able to move seamlessly from one side of the scale to the other and switch around if you need to. And again, there's an opportunity to transmute this energy where the moon, the moon is exalted in Taurus. It likes to be in Taurus, right? Because our emotions want to be secure and comfortable in the material world around us, right? We're embedded in this medium of our growth, and it's safe and it's secure and it surrounds us. And so it's a comfortable place for the moon. But this quincunx here is really challenging our minds and our conceptualization of the world around us through Mercury to be able to find our fulcrum, right? And to move back and forth between our will and our love seamlessly, depending on what is necessary. Ooh, that's going to be very important coming forward. Now, the Mars, here we are as we come into our grand trine here. Let's go forward a little bit further, shall we? Because here is Mars in a direct trine to Saturn retrograde. And actually, if we go further throughout Saturday to the end of the day, we're going to find that by tomorrow, the 26th, there is our grand trine, almost exact, with Mars and Saturn, right? There it is. And you see here that the Sun and Rahu are also in a direct trine. They're reinforcing the base of this trine. So, you know, Mars is... Mars in this degree is moving from... So now we've gotten to Sunday, right? So we've moved from Saturday to Sunday. So Mars is at this degree in its trine to Saturn that really is, there's this, Mars has to return to, you know, it's not powerful in Libra, right? All of that really fiery, thrusting energy of the warrior is not really well utilized in Libra, because Libra, again, is not about us necessarily acting on our own ego or subjective experience or actualization. It's about now applying that to a relationship or a social context. And so it can be really frustrating if that's all you want to do, is to act on this warrior nature. It's me and I'm the warrior, right? And I see this a lot in some of these chats where people are like, oh shit, I've been behind the curve and I need to like catch up and start doing stuff. And instead of like, you know, instead of embracing the fact that they can really utilize their warrior energy in a social context and be like, how can I help? How can I be part of this process? How can I apply what I've learned about myself into this larger picture now? You know, people are just kind of like, you know, projecting their own guilt out and trying to like control the situation, which is really what happens when we don't, you know, align with Mars in its detriment and just let it be feeling disempowered, right? So that's one way. But in this trine to Saturn, it's you know, we can really find that fire. There's always something to return to. There is a fire within us that we can always return to, even when we are at our most deserted or most empty hours. There's a spiritual power ready to welcome us, and we can really gather ourselves and our warrior energy from that perspective. And in fact, Saturn in its retrograde in Aquarius right now is certainly providing some sort of backbone or scaffolding within us with you know, at least some sort of preformed mental archetype of where we could go, right? It's not the actual thing. It's more of like a wax figure. So, but it's still giving us something to look at and being like, oh, I'm looking up to this. This kind of looks like where I think I want to go or we should go. And with Saturn, it's giving it a really strong form. It's giving it a skeleton, right? It's giving it the actual, you know, scaffolding or backbone in which everything else hangs on, right? And so we can look towards that part of ourselves right now and find the fire within us that we need when we're feeling lost. And it's all in our mind, right? When we're talking about this air trine and when we have the moon at the same degree of Gemini, this is the pinnacle point where we find that people, and we feel the strong urge within each of us personally, we're going to be like, oh, it's time to start surrounding the factory now. Like the workers are starting to go on strike. And you can see this already happening, but it's going to come into like this really supported, very structurally sound connection by Sunday, where we're each going to be feeling that strong urge and drive. And it may not even be us personally, but we're connecting into the collective through that moon, right? That allows us to connect. And we're going to find here a real strong urge to be like, okay, it's time to start reaching out beyond what is, and to revolt against unfair privilege. I mean, that's really what we're looking at with that particular aspect. And with the sun and the North Node kind of reinforcing this connection right here, right? Where it's that fire, that blazing fire within us, even at our most empty hour, that is in a trine to this urge here on some level to be like, okay, it's time to push back against the unfair privilege. And it's inevitable that you realize this in Gemini, because it's part of the developing consciousness to back and forth, thesis and antithesis, right? The Hegelian dialectic, before it gets utilized to control people. It's just in its pure form in Gemini. And so part of that is the inevitable going, oh, this is unfair. It's time to do something to balance this out in our expression, right? Because that's really Gemini is expression, especially in this Hyades starseed position, right? And we have something within us right now that gives us like an archetype of like, this is where we want to go. This is representing who we actually want to be. And then you have the connection with the Libra sun and Rahu in Gemini, reinforcing the base of this pyramid, or this triangle, or this trine, which is, again, this same degree again is about this fire at the center, but it's really about a fire of communion. It's a fire where we're all sitting around. It's that spark at the center, right? Our spiritual focus, whatever that is, the creator, God, our communion with each other, what holds us together, is really what is going to support this pyramid in this air trine. It's really very beautiful. And the Rahu, right, where our soul is pulling us in order to evolve, the soul's trajectory is really looking for this traditionally based value system now. We're kind of nostalgic for it. Like, we're starting to really get pulled in a direction because the nodes move backwards, right? They naturally move in a retrograde fashion, the nodes in reference to us. And so we're getting closer and closer to the Pleiades, which again is going to be all about a direct connection and communion with natural energies, natural law, with nature. And it's going to be more about the values and the traditions that go along with our connection to the earth and to each other as just being natural. This is really going to support this process. I mean, this is a beautiful coming together in a moment where we're each going to be feeling an urge to express our discontent with the privilege that is unfair. Wow, this is quite a moment. See, that's the thing. It's not, I think in some ways, like, even if we hit a wall with the audit, all it's going to do is just trigger, in some ways, this aspect even more, right? It's just going to align people even more with the fact that we have to find it within ourselves and within our relationship to each other. And it's really the only way. And look at how it's already like blueprinted for this time period, right? Oh, divine timing is literally the only timing. Okay, and so we have the moon conjunct Rahu, the moon trine sun, that whole air trine, trine, blah, 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 blah. Now this is where it's going to get interesting. We have that beautiful moment on Sunday, and then we see that the moon comes into a sextile with Chiron and also meets Black Moon Lilith at the same time. And this is also where Ceres comes involved. So I jumped the gun on that with Ceres and Lilith. But what I will say is that now the moon and Chiron is involved. And you see here that Chiron is moved into the next degree and it's retrograde. So now we're moving into a place where we're really going to be looking for some sort of centralizing force within our consciousness, right? We've been dealing with the polarization within ourselves between natural law and human man-made law, and what that feels like, and what that has been bringing out in us in terms of our victim narrative. Now we're going to be like, there's a strong urge with this degree of Aries to There's a very strong urge with this degree of Aries because it just moved in here with Chiron. It's the power resulting from the formal integration of the collective desire for order, right? It's a centralizing power at the level of a very rigidly structured consciousness, okay? We're really going to be struggling with finding some centralizing force within each of us that is going to rule everything else, right? There's a collective desire for order. And there's going to be, there's the ego. It's really the ego that becomes that centralization of power in that consciousness, right? Because otherwise it's just like, base emotions and instincts at this point in Aries. And then we come into this 10 to 11 degrees of Aries. And all of a sudden you start to realize, like, I need something that's going to harness all of this. Otherwise it's just like totally wild. And so again, it will bring out on some level, it will definitely bring out on some level this, it's like there's gonna be a how do I say this? Sorry, I got the cat that's like hanging out now. We can take where the moon is, right? The moon will be in a sextile. The moon will be in a conjunction with Black Moon Lilith and Ceres, right? The newly opened lands, right? They've come into the newly opened lands now, and also to this, also at the same time, the liberation of the past, right? We have to let go of the past if we're going to step into the future. And we can take this energy and really invest it into where Chiron is, and remember it, because this is going to be a place where Chiron sits for a while in its retrograde. So it's going to move very slowly through this 10 to 11 degree position. And we're going to feel a lot of guilt and shame for wanting to have like something within us come in and just really centralize our own power, right? As if we're not allowed to have our own sense of identity and self, right? And there'll be lots of things that'll come out that'll really trigger this. And certainly it will be used against us. I mean, that's the thing about astrology and why people think it's evil. It's not that astrology is evil. It's just people with nefarious intentions that are actually awake. Oh, that's what I wanted to talk about. People who are, just because you're awake does not equate to good. Let's be real here. Okay? Awake does not equate to good. Awake means you see the full picture. Awake means that you are fully conscious, and your choice in that moment is what you do with that awakening, okay? And there's plenty of people who are awake and fully conscious that are choosing a pathway of domination, okay? So get that out of your head, in my humble opinion, that being awake and conscious is equated to good. It's not. It's just being awake and conscious. You choose whether you're going to be good or not good in that situation, right? And so those who are awake and conscious of these energies and want to control will utilize our shadow in order to trigger our wounding around wanting to have some sort of structure to our own consciousness, okay? So be aware of that. And again, we're moving into new territory. Black Moon Lilith is involved in this sextile because it's the moon and Black Moon Lilith and Ceres all over here in Gemini. So we can really harness some very deep feminine power, right? With the moon and Lilith and Ceres. This is all feminine energy. We can really harness this deep power of the feminine archetype through all of these different ways of understanding it, and really apply this to this concept that we need some sort of ruler outside of us to come in and take over, right? And that that's the only way that we're ever going to like actually feel better about what's happening. And in fact, we can actually do that for ourselves, number one. And number two, it's through the release of where we've been and liberating ourselves from our own past that is going to allow us to heal this wound and not have it be used against us, because it will, because there'll be chaos, right? There'll be somebody that wants to come in and be like, I'm going to take over. And I already talked about my prediction or forecast for of the changing of the guard, so I won't go into that now. But Some of you might know what I'm talking about. Anyway, so this is the end of Sunday. So let's just take a real brief look at the week here, because we'll be together the whole time. Number one, well, here is a quincunx with the moon and Venus and Scorpio. That's interesting. The big thing though is that Mercury stations retrograde on Monday, the 27th at Arcturus, right? And is going to retrograde back to 10 to 11 degrees of Libra. So that's we're going into that phase now, right? Review period of all of this. Are you adept enough? Are you an adept enough to be able to transfigure outside of time and space to find that place that's outside of that polarity, but at the same time being able to participate in it? That is the real mastery there. And so we're going to have this opportunity to go back over all of this territory of Libra, and then also too, keep in mind that during this week, that means that the Mercury is going to come back and square Pluto again, except this time retrograde. So be prepared for that too. It's going to keep coming back around. I have too many windows open. The 28th is our third quarter square of the sun and a Cancer moon. Okay, Cancer moon. And again, there's like there's a protective mechanism that's going to go on here with this 6 degrees of Libra, right, where we're going to feel wanting to this guardianship of who we are, right, as we're being antagonized. Oh boy, we're definitely going to be antagonized by the forces of darkness, and our ability to ward that off, but also guard that aspect of ourselves or the people in our life or the people in a social context that aren't quite up to the same place yet, right? That's what this degree really means. But at the square, right, that third quarter square is always about crisis in consciousness. What are we going to be conscious of, And in that moment, the 6 to 7 degrees of Cancer is, and remember, the moon is very powerful in Cancer. It's home territory, it's rulership. And this degree of Cancer that the sun or the moon will be in at the square is like two nature spirits, like frolicking in the moonlight. It's the idea that there is so much more happening in the background that we don't always see, and that we have to kind of trust in some ways. And so there will be this sense here of wanting to guard and protect in the face of antagonism from nefarious forces. But at the same time, there's going to be a deep feeling and a subtle feeling, right? Because now that the moon is in its waning phase, right, it's getting darker and darker. So it's getting a little bit harder and harder to have full reflection of what's going on in that subconscious realm. We're going to have to trust that there are things happening behind the scenes in the background that we don't often get to see, that we have to just feel into. So that crisis of consciousness is going to test that moment on the 28th. The moon, and then we come into the 29th. The Venus will come into a trine with Neptune in this beautiful water trine. And there's going to be a release, a socially acceptable release of aggression on some level here in response to this. How do we take this peak experience and apply it to reality? It's going to come through some type of socially acceptable, aggressive release in our material world, in our relationships, in what we love, who we love, what is valuable to us. It's going to come through something like that. I'm not exactly sure how it will, but I do see that it will be a release, a socially acceptable release of these aggressive tendencies that we have no choice but to see when we go deep into Scorpio. So now we know that it's there, and we have to give a release valve societally, and that's going to be coming right up to the surface on the 29th. And that same day is also too when the sun comes into a trine with Saturn, just like where Mars was. But now Saturn is in the degree that it's going to station direct, and this is the cosmic egg. Oh, the cosmic egg. right? The cosmic egg, the fact that we are not born out of our ancestral lineage, but a new mutation of human, right? That's going to come out of the egg. And so just wait until Saturn stations direct. We're going to see some things born out of an egg, all right? This birthing process has been coming up quite a bit in the imagery for the readings. And so I'm not, this is where it's coming out in the astrology. And again, this, we're going with the guardianship, right? The desire to protect something, the propensity to protect against antagonism, while also nourishing and taking care of those around us who are not quite at the same level. And I'm not saying that we're any better or anybody's any better. This is just about the idea that in a social context, there's always going to be those who are more of the protector and those who are still learning, right? And that changes all the time. That's not a static thing. And we're going to really sustain ourselves and find our expression through this point. And then the trine to Saturn retrograde at the cosmic egg is, there's something new that's going to be born here. There's like some new mutation that's going to eventually come forward, and we're going to start feeling it within ourselves. And so it'll kind of give us like, we want to protect the egg, right? We want to protect the egg from the antagonism, that part of ourselves within, that strong, stable, Saturnian responsibility that is within ourselves, that is that new version of ourselves that's going to come forward, that new version of humanity that's going to come forward, that starts within each of us, is starting to, like, the shell is really forming at this point. And so there's going to be a real motivation to protect that in this moment, at the same time that there's going to be this aggressive release, but a socially acceptable aggressive release, along the same lines in terms of this peak experience. How do we put it into action? Well, it's going to come through some sort of pressure release valve, for a socially acceptable pressure release valve in the realm of our relationships and what we value. And at the same time, it's going to allow for us to then, I think in some ways, that will also allow for us to protect what is coming forward, this new version of humanity that is ultimately the groundwork is being laid right now with Saturn within each of us, right? So that's this coming week as well. And then on the 30th, Venus is then going to square Jupiter. Oh, look at that. And there's going to be a T-square. Look at this T-square now that with the moon in Cancer. Wow. The moon in Cancer with Mercury. So Mercury back in conjunction with Arcturus and coming into a conjunction with Spica as the T-square with this opposition with, so our feelings, and especially feelings of emotional safety and belonging and wanting to be held and emotionally secure with the moon in Cancer, and feeling very secure in ourselves with the moon in late Cancer, in an opposition to Pluto just destroying everything. Of course, it's going to again be in this realm of Mercury now retrograde going, so did we create that tripod for ourselves? What is that third wing that we developed? Did we develop it? And maybe we should go back over that territory again as we're feeling into this. Now also Mars opposition to Chiron, so there's some tension right there. And then also we have Venus in a square to Jupiter in Aquarius, and it's going to be a real struggle here as we are trying to transubstantiate like these animal drives into something of a higher level of consciousness, whereas within the dynamics between us, right? Like the actual power dynamics in relationship as in itself, right? Like how do we do that in our relationships and what's valuable to us, in our world? But then the square to Jupiter, right? In Aquarius, that is really about the big, the full picture, is, the proper discipline, right? There's going to be a lot of release valve over here, energy with Scorpio, releasing this energy, and with Aquarius, it's really about, did we discipline ourselves? Are we able to have we taken up the proper training, in order to hold the energy of this collective? And I think that square there is really going to highlight that, because it's, again, we're going to, the process of transubstantiation, where we go from these base drives, especially when we just came out of a moment of like a release valve for these aggressive tendencies. Now we have to figure out how to take those tendencies and transmute them into something more. And in the square, it'll be like, well, that's, what about the self-discipline of the collective? Did we go through the proper training? Are we able to really like hold ourselves together in the face of this performance? I guess I think that's one way to put it. And these things will become more clear as we get closer to them, right? But it's this T-square that I think is really really going to be interesting. Let's go back, because it'll be exact right here. Yes, look at that. And then, of course, the next day on the 1st is when Mars and Chiron will oppose each other, and that's going to be a real big ego battle on some level. So I think I'm going to leave it there, because that's plenty of information that we have for this week, my friends. So take very good care of yourselves this week, okay? And especially through the weekend. And realize that it's all here to help us, and every single moment is a choice of how we're going to interact with what is presented to us. And just because we're awake and conscious doesn't necessarily mean that we are good. Our goodness comes from our choices in every moment. That's what free will is all about. And don't underestimate the fact that other people who are conscious and awake are making other choices, right? And so I think that that's a trap that's been set for many people, to think that just being conscious and awake and saying you're conscious and awake means that you're ultimately good. And it's not about that. It's about your choices about being conscious and awake. And I think that that's the difference between the 4th dimension and the 5th dimension and beyond, right? Is the choices that you're making with your consciousness. And like I said, don't underestimate those who are awake and are making different choices than you are, because they've had generation upon generation upon generation of time to practice and to fine-tune their skill set of control and manipulation and domination. And so we need to up our game and actually beat them at their own game, and we can't do that if we're not being realistic about what's right in front of us. So let me know if you need anything. I have a flash sale going. It's on my social media with a bundle of a lunar transit reading and a Reiki treatment at the same time. You get a ton of information that way. I get a ton of information that way as well. And so you can find the details on my social media for that. And I'll be sending out an email soon. I'm going to be putting together the astrology for the equinox up to the solstice, so that we can have an idea of what to expect in the coming months, because it's going to get even more intense when we have Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter and Mercury all stationing direct in October. So all systems go at that point. And so right now we're still in a position where we're feeling all of this stuff within our own internalized process and getting an opportunity to understand it, so that when it's time to really come out into a social context and things start turning on, that we are prepared and ready, and we have built our strategy in some way. So I love you guys. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. I'm glad to be on the mend, and we will be together on Monday for the Daily Medicine. Thanks, guys. Have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you soon.